Welcome back to the sugar training modules. My name is Stacy Pavelko, and together with my colleague Bob Owens, we've been working on sugar for quite some time. In this, the second of the sugar modules, the basis for sugar, a survey of how school-based SLPs use LSA, I'm going to discuss with you the results of a survey that Bob and I conducted along with our colleagues Marie Ireland and Debbie Haas-Vaughn. The survey was completed in the summer of 2013. It was an online survey delivered through Qualtrics, and members of the State Education Agency's Communication Disabilities Council emailed the invitations out to school-based SLPs in their states. We had a final sample size of 1,399 school-based SLPs. So to give you a little bit of information about who these participants were, 88% of them were ASHA certified and 95% held a master's degree in CSD. When we asked about their caseload sizes, over 75% had caseloads of 21 students or larger, and you can see here the breakdown. So 29% had a caseload size of 21 to 40 students, 44% had a caseload size of 41 to 60 students, and 16% had a caseload size of 61 to 80 students. To get a sense of how large the district is in which the SLPs worked, we asked how many full-time SLPs actually worked in their district. And as you can see from this table, we had varying answers from very small districts with only 1 to 5 SLPs to very large districts that had more than 30 full-time SLPs. We had 4 research questions when we distributed the survey. First, we wanted to know whether school-based SLPs use language sample analysis in their clinical practice, and if they did, for what purposes. We wanted to know the characteristics of the language samples they collect, the methods of analysis, and we also wanted to know about the barriers for those SLPs who said that they did not use it. We wanted to know why not. As I said previously, our first research question was simply asking, do SLPs use language sampling in their clinical practice? And it turned out that 66.7% of SLPs said they did use it. But that means 1/3 of our participants said they never used it during the 2012-2013 school year. Of those who said they did use it, we asked why you use it, and the biggest majority said they were using it for an initial evaluation. Fewer numbers reported using language sampling for a reevaluation, for screening, or for measuring progress in therapy. In order to capture how frequently SLPs are really using language sampling, we also asked those SLPs who said that they did language sampling, well, how many language samples did you collect during the school year? So this data is of those 67% who said that they used language sampling, how many samples did they collect? And remember that over 75% of these participants had caseloads of 21 or larger. And you can see from the table that over half of them collected 10 or fewer samples during the whole school year. So we interpret this to mean that even though many people say they were using language sampling, they're not using it very regularly because the largest majority collected fewer than 10 samples, even though the largest majority also had caseloads of 21 or larger. Our second research question focused on the characteristics of the language samples that SLPs collect. So the next few slides are going to focus on the characteristics of the sample. What we found is that most SLPs collect samples that were 10 minutes or shorter in length. We also found that most SLPs were collecting 50 utterances or less for their samples. Finally, with respect to the characteristics of the language samples, we ask the SLPs what kind of task they use to elicit the sample. So for example, you could use conversation, you could use narrative, which would be something like tell me a story. You could use expository tasks, something like explain how you. You could do a picture description, an observation. We also gave the option for other. Across all ages, and we have, this slide shows you it's disaggregated by ages, so we have birth to 3, 3 to 5, and then elementary, middle, and high school. Across all ages, the most frequently reported task that SLPs use is conversation, and that ranges from 93% of our middle school SLPs using conversation all the way up to 96% of our birth to 3, 3 to 5, and elementary school-based SLPs using conversation. We also asked our participants whether they recorded their samples. And so we gave them the options of audio recording, video recording, or neither. And the neither option is real time. In other words, the SLP transcribes what the child is saying while the child is talking. 52%, more than half of our participants said they do not record their samples. Instead, they try to write down what the child is saying while the child is talking. In addition to asking the participants about the characteristics of the samples they collect, we also asked the participants how they analyze the samples. And as you can see in this table, the most frequently reported way to analyze the sample was a self-designed protocol. So even though there have been other protocols that have been in the literature for quite some time, most clinicians are using a self-designed protocol when they analyze the samples. Finally, for those clinicians who reported that they do not use language sampling, we asked them why not. And as you can see, the most frequently reporting barrier was that they feel language sampling is too time-consuming. They also reported having limited training, limited resources, and feeling that language sampling has limited recognition as a valid assessment measure as other barriers to why they're not using language sampling. In this slide, what we're showing is the comparison of the Kemp and Klee findings in 1997 to the results of our survey, which was published in 2016. Our results showed that we actually have fewer clinicians who are using language sampling than what Kemp and Klee reported. We both report similar amounts of SLPs who are not recording their samples, which that was a little surprising to us with the explosion of technology since 1997. We thought more SLPs might record their samples, but that's not really true. And the same reasons were reported for why not. Both surveys found the most frequently reported reason for not using language sampling was because language sampling is too time-consuming. So again, SLPs are not sampling because they think it's too time-consuming, or they have limited resources, limited training, or they think language sampling has limited recognition as a valid assessment measure. So now that we really understand the challenges to using language sampling, we hope that the sugar method might help to address some of those barriers. Okay, so how does sugar address these barriers? Well, as you go through the modules, you'll find out that language sampling does not need to be too time-consuming. These modules will show you how you can collect, transcribe, and analyze a 50 utterance sample in 30 minutes or less. And we would say that's probably faster than you can give and score a test of language. With respect to limited resources, sugar is free. You only need Microsoft Word and some kind of a computer. With respect to limited training or limited expertise, these modules are here so that you can come back to them to use for training and to help you hone your language sampling skills. Finally, the idea that language sampling has limited recognition as a valid assessment measure, in the next slide I'm going to show you a study that we did to look at the validity of 4 sugar values. So to address the issue that language sampling has limited recognition as a valid assessment measure, Bob and I looked at the relationships between measures obtained from a language sample and measures obtained from standardized testing. So in this study, we had 10 children who were all monolingual English speakers, and they'd all been previously identified as having a moderate specific language impairment. They were also all receiving intervention services. And so this table represents the relationship between language sample measures, and those would include mean length of utterance, total number of words, clauses per sentence, and words per sentence. Those are the first 4 values. And 3 values that were obtained from the comprehensive assessment of spoken language, the CASL. And those are from 3 of the subtests of the CASL. And you can see in this correlation table that these 4 values had very high statistically significant relationships to those values obtained from scores on the CASL. So hopefully the results of the study that I discussed on the previous slide help to dispel the idea that language sampling has limited recognition as a valid assessment measure. In the upcoming modules, we're going to jump right into how sugar works. So how do you collect the sample, transcribe, analyze, and plan intervention when necessary?